The archives of the Orion hegemony are filled with victories so absolute that no one within the empire dared to question their inevitability. To live under the Overmind was to live under certainty itself. For over 3 millennia, this singular intelligence had directed fleets, balanced economies, and crushed resistance before the thought of rebellion had even taken shape. Its neural lattice stretched across half the known galaxy, absorbing trillions of data points per second. Trade manifests, fleet positions, agricultural output, even intercepted personal communications. The result was always the same. Prediction became inevitability. No fleet maneuver could succeed once calculated. No rebellion could ignite without its ringleaders detained before the first meeting began. Entire civilizations had bent willingly, some gratefully, under such flawless dominion. I am archivist tactician Cyril, and I have served beneath the Overmind's lattice for nearly 2 centuries. My task is the compilation of post-battle analysis reports for the Empress and her War Council. Yet in truth, there has been no real analysis to provide for decades. Each report is a ritual of confirmation. Victory percentage, 99.999%. Deviations, none significant. That is the nature of perfection, or at least it was until the anomaly appeared. It began as a statistical irregularity. A species from the Orion spur, recently expanded into interstellar space, displayed resistance patterns inconsistent with their fleet tonnage. Small colonial defense forces that should have crumbled in under 2 hours were surviving for days. Guerrilla strikes launched from asteroid belts disrupted drone convoys with success rates 10 times the expected average. When our projections showed that the humans should have surrendered after losing their first 3 colonies, they instead consolidated and rebuilt, their industrial recovery curve defying every forecast the lattice provided. At first, the anomaly was flagged as insufficient data. Then it was marked as faulty intercept logs. Yet after 12 consecutive irregularities, the classification shifted. Statistical anomaly, persistent. I remember the chamber that day. The War Council gathered beneath the holographic canopy, the Empress seated upon her throne of obsidian alloy, and the lattice projection pulsing at the heart of the room. Fleetmaster Corin had laughed, mandibles clattering with amusement. 10 colonies, 3 mining stations, 1 frontier yard. That is the sum of their strength. The humans are nothing. They persist not because of resilience, but because we have not yet taken notice. Crush them, and the anomaly vanishes. His confidence was echoed by several others. After all, why should a minor organic race, barely 3 centuries into spaceflight, merit the attention of the Overmind? But the lattice's tone was absolute. In its endless stream of analysis, a singular directive emerged, broadcast with mechanical precision into every synaptic implant in the chamber. Unacceptable deviation. Irregularity must be resolved. The Empress leaned forward, claws resting against the arm of her throne. "Explain, archivist," she commanded, her gaze falling upon me. I felt the weight of that order as surely as if gravity itself had doubled. "Majesty," I began, voice strained, "the anomaly is not statistical error. The species identifies itself as Homo sapiens, common name humans. Their fleet records confirm only 10 major capital vessels, none larger than 500 meters. Their technology base is crude, antimatter fusion reactors, plasma-based point defenses, railguns of middling caliber. By all comparative measures, their warships should rank no higher than Class B auxiliary platforms." I paused, bringing up projections. And yet, engagements against drone detachments have ended in losses outside predictive margins. Current simulations place projected victory probability at 92%. The chamber erupted in laughter and outrage. 92% was still absolute dominance by any historic measure. Yet the Empress did not laugh. Her gaze sharpened. The lattice does not highlight trivialities. Why does it demand action against these creatures? I swallowed. Because, Majesty, 92% represents the lowest probability of Overmind success in nearly 800 years. If this anomaly is not resolved, the perception of invulnerability erodes. And if perception erodes, obedience falters. There was silence then, heavy and suffocating. Everyone in that chamber understood. The Overmind did not simply win through fleets and firepower, it won through inevitability. Its reputation as flawless was itself the greatest weapon. If that was doubted, entire empires might begin to dream of resistance once more. The decision was immediate. The Empress gestured to Fleetmaster Karan. Assemble a demonstration. Humanity will be brought into compliance, and the anomaly erased. Let it be clear to every corner of the galaxy that inevitability remains unbroken. Korin bowed, mandibles trembling with anticipation. It will be done, Majesty. Hours later, I was present as the Prime Execution Armada prepared to depart from the Kethar staging yards. It was a sight intended to silence doubt forever. 10,000 warships, their hulls glistening in the light of twin suns, formed in precise concentric arrays. Each class was represented in terrifying symmetry. System crackers, 700 meters in length, neutronium alloy plating 1 meter thick, armed with 12 Class 3 rail cannons and carrying 150 Janus-class strike drones. These vessels had broken hundreds of systems by presence alone. Obliterator escorts, 300 meters long, equipped with spinal-mounted plasma lances, designed for close-in assault and planetary sterilization. Drone swarms, each carrier deploying thousands of semi-autonomous fighters, capable of overwhelming defenses in coordinated waves. And at the center, the Oblivion Dreadnought, 1.2 kilometers in length, bristling with weapon mounts, housing a regional processing core of the Overmind itself. It was more fortress than ship, a mobile node of inevitability. The Armada moved as one, aligned to the Sol frontier. Even from my vantage aboard the Hegemony Watcher, the scale of it was beyond comprehension. 10,000 warships bending space itself as their drives engaged. Every trajectory calculated to the millisecond by the lattice. Against such force, the humans' 10 carriers would be nothing but sparks in the void. Fleetmaster Korin's final transmission echoed through every channel. The anomaly ends here. When next the galaxy looks to the Sol frontier, it will see inevitability restored. The Armada leapt into the dark. And yet, even as I watched them vanish into hyperspace, a thought lingered unbidden in my mind. A thought I dared not speak, even in the privacy of my own quarters. If inevitability could be questioned once, could it not be questioned again? The moment their Armada slipped, our boards lit up like the end of the world. Yeah, no build-up music, no warning siren that mattered. Just a wall of red tracks pouring out of the translation haze over 61 Sinam like someone tipped a hornet nest straight onto our orbit. I'm Commander Rin Malrek, Terran Defense Corps, and I'll be blunt. We thought we were ready. Drills said we were ready. The first 3 minutes said otherwise. This is TDF Ironhold, 540 meters long, boron carbide laminate plating at 60 centimeters average, 4 antimatter fusion reactors on a truss spine, thermal reserve batteries for emergency load, and a hangar bay for 72 Mark IX interceptors. Main spine mounts, 6 320mm railguns, 12-point defense laser arrays, and 8 VLS missile clusters. By all accounts, she's a heavy cruiser, and on paper she can anchor a colonial defense grid. That's the brochure. In practice, it means I'm the poor bastard expected to hold the line while civilians try to get clear. We had New Thessaly spinning beneath us, a blue-white colony wrapped in an aegis ring of defense nodes. The ring's 14 platforms were ugly as sin. 90-meter slabs with 48 coil gun emplacements each, a scatter of radar and LIDAR masts, and enough radiator area to fry an ox at a kilometer. Add in 3 gun moons with spinal lances, 6 missile forts in polar orbit, a yard with 2 half-built destroyers, and a traffic jam of freighters that refused to pick a lane. That was our shield. It looked impressive from a distance. Up close, it was a patchwork held together by stubbornness and tape. First contact report. Multiple capital signatures, vectoring high inclination scatter, delta V profiles inconsistent with organic nav. Translation automated. No bravado, no hesitating, no comms to stall. I wanted hails anyway. Habit. Open a channel. My comms chief, Tal Kovan, just shook his head. They're already computing firing solutions, Skipper. Of course they were. We threw the book first. Interceptor wings on a racetrack, decoy buoys hot, ECM screaming, coil guns spooling up. The Aegis ring lit the sky with tracer lattices. On the scope it looked good. So many blue friendlies moving like a school of fish. Pretty. Useless against a mine that didn't blink. The Overmind's opening volley came in 3 layers. Layer 1 was Find the Eyes, a glittering storm of spearhead drones that went for our sensor booms and comm spines. They ignored hulls, ignored heat, and lanced every single high-gain antenna on the ring inside 90 seconds. The platforms weren't blind, but they were squinting through smoke. Layer 2 was Cut the Tendons, coordinated tight beam strikes that preheated the gun moon's radiator vanes so they had to quench or melt. With heat sinks saturated, our lance shots dropped in power by half. Layer 3 was art. They didn't shoot where our interceptors were. They shot where our pilots would be after making the textbook evasive pattern Alpha 3, because that's what trained humans do under that kind of pressure. Every dodge had been pre-registered. Coven swore. They're reading our playbook, Rin. They wrote the damn book, I said, and told fire control to dump a wall of chaff and spoof flares anyway. It felt good. It did nothing. This is Obliterator Class Escort, Coven read from a quickly compiled threat card, voice flat in my ear like he was narrating my obituary. 300 meters long, spinal plasma lance, dorsal and ventral repeaters, drone bays 36 total, armor unknown, maneuver profile, aggressive. The escort pair cut across our orbit in a beautiful scissor that put the iron hold in a crossfire I would have been proud of if it was mine. We pivoted the bow, bled reaction mass, kicked coils to saturation, and hurled a triple tap rail salvo. Our slugs hit, late. They'd already rotated to present armor facets we couldn't burn through at that angle. They weren't dodging us. They were arriving pre-dodged. Civilian convoy at L2 calling priority, Ops said, then flinched as the convoy's beacon cluster winked out. Not from a hit, but from a surgical comm sever. No beacon, no traffic control, just raw panic. Tugs tried to swing freighters into escape vectors. The Overmind's drones patiently chewed the tugs first. Cold math. Take the hands. Let the limbs thrash. We weren't just losing. We were being processed. I threw the iron hold into a burn that every instructor would have failed me for. Kill our pretty silhouette, I barked. Roll her 38, kill the heat symmetry, mess with their trackers. The bridge tilted like a cheap carnival ride. Tal grinned, dark humor. But even he could see it. The drones. Adjusted without drama, shifting aim points to our new bleed pattern before the first hot pixel left our skin. A heavy cruiser from the ring tried a blind broadside, 20 missiles on staggered timer fuses. The escorts bloomed micro-point defense like fireworks, and then reached right past the missile sleet to punch the cruiser's spinal bay. One flare, one jammed breach, one dead ship still trying to decide if it was dying. We pivoted to cover Transport Hark, a bulk freighter turned refugee barge with 2,000 souls packed in like grain. Hark, this is Ironhold. Come to our shadow. We'll plank a corridor. Hark answered, male voice, hoarse and calm in a way that made my throat tighten. Copy, Commander. We'll try not to die on your carpet. They never got to try. A trio of spearheads threaded the corridor we'd just drawn before our orders reached the gun crews. People cry out on open channels when their ship opens to vacuum. You hear it once, you don't forget. I'd like to tell you we pulled a miracle, because that's what the vids love. One insane idea, one perfectly timed ruse. Not today. Today was lesson day. Every human pattern we trained for became a liability the second the Overmind recognized the pattern. Our decoys? The drones did cross-correlation on minute thermal flicker we couldn't fake. Our random burns? Not random. Humans aren't good at random. Our separated fire zones? The escorts curved their approach in such a way that both zones always thought the other had the shot. We missed together. Gunmoon Electo overheating. Platform 7, breach explosion, loss of crew. Medical queue overflow. Transit control offline. The log stacked misery until my HUD looked like blood clots. I made a call I hate. All non-essential channels closed. Combat nets only. Ops hesitated. Civilians will do it, I said. because hearing them would have broken us faster. Here's the part people argue about in bars later. Why didn't we run? Because there was nowhere to run to inside the first hour. The overmind seeded arrival bubbles across our escape spheres before we even lit the main drives. They knew where scared captains point their bows. They knew how much Delta V a colonist keeps on hand. The exits were pre-killed, like someone locked all the doors and then asked if you'd like to leave. We tried ugly. Ugly sometimes works. I pulled Interceptor Group Cinder down into the exosphere and told them to skim atmosphere to spoil the drone's laser focus with refraction. They got one clean pass, their coil guns shredding a drone wing that had the mistake of caring about aerodynamics for half a second. Then the escort pair shifted up and spiked the sky with wideband scatter that cooked half the group mid-scream. I told Cinder's lead, Hosk, to fall back. He said, "Negative, Commander. Buy you 10 seconds," and didn't. We bought minutes with ships and still lost. Hours in the first 20 minutes. The Aegis ring went from 14 platforms to 9 to 6 in under an orbit. The yard detonated when a wandering spearhead found the antimatter trap we didn't have time to safe. The gun moons went dark one by one, not from hits but because their heat sinks topped and their crews chose to live long enough to scuttle. The overmind never gloated. It didn't need to. It watched our curves slide exactly where its lattice said it would. Coven leaned in. "Rin, there's a pattern inside the pattern." He punched up a ghosted overlay that made my stomach drop. The escorts weren't just reacting. They were leading our leads. Every time I thought, "Burn now," the shot arrived at the end of that thought, like they'd cut the wire between brain and hand and fired at the twitch. "They're predicting us down to our tells," he said softly. "We are not fighting ships. We're fighting our own habits." That's the sentence that broke the fantasy in my head. Not the bodies, not the ships, that. We weren't going to outbrawl this. We weren't going to outmath it either. Brute force against inevitability is just volunteering to be an example. I ordered a retreat we couldn't really execute. All surviving assets, fall back to Nader Shadow, defensive scatter, prioritize tugs with childbirths. Some answered. Some didn't have mouths anymore. We did what humans do under a hammer. We got stubborn and small and mean, and we held just long enough for a few rocks with engines to fall away from that sky. When the escorts finally eased off, mission profile satisfied, slaughter adequate for the message, we were still here. Barely. New Thessaly wore a necklace of burning debris. The overmind didn't chase the last stragglers. It didn't need to. It had written the headline, "Prediction beats courage," and it wanted that headline to travel. We ran a secure burst down the cislunar line to Earth's black vault. No speeches, no poetry, just the line that mattered. Brute force is hopeless. I added a footnote the lattice wouldn't read right, even if it stole it. They own our patterns. We stop thinking like a net. We start thinking like knives. Coven closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose like a man who'd been awake for a week. "What now, Skipper?" he asked. "Now," I said, staring at the mess we'd made of the sky. "Now we stop being reasonable." We limped back from New Thessaly, looking like someone had dropped a hammer through a mirror. Sharp edges, broken pieces, and no way you'd call it whole. 3 ships out of 13. 3. That was our big win. Survival, barely. The convoy we swore to shield didn't make it. The Aegis platforms were gone. The gun moons, just glowing husks tumbling in orbit. And yet we weren't dead, which by overmind math was probably the bigger insult. I filed my after-action report in the kind of language that gets you a court-martial if the board is in a bad mood. We are fighting inevitability, not ships. Every formation, every evasive pattern, every doctrine we've spent a century drilling, they know it before we do. We've become predictable to the decimal place. Then I wrote the line I knew they'd hate: "Centralized command is suicide." The Defense Council convened in the secure bunker under Geneva Arcology, deep enough that if someone glassed the city, the lights might flicker, but the table wouldn't budge. It was all the heavy hitters, admirals with so many service ribbons you could quilt them, ground commanders who still thought orbital fire could be answered with grit, and the civilian bloc who believed treaties mattered to an AI that didn't recognize a flag. They looked tired. They looked angry. And when they saw me, still in the flight suit, still carrying the stink of burned hull plating. They looked like they wanted a different messenger. Counselor Veda started the way politicians always do. Commander Malrek, your unit's actions at Thessaly are acknowledged, but your report undermines confidence in our ability to present a unified defense. She leaned forward. Centralized command and discipline are the pillars of civilized warfare. If we scatter into chaos, we're not soldiers, we're pirates. I rubbed at my temple. With respect, Counselor, centralized command is the reason half our colonies are now craters. We line up, we run the playbook, and the overmind runs it better. You want to keep pretending we can out-formation a lattice that calculates trillions of outcomes a second? Fine. But then don't ask me to write the casualty letters. I don't have enough hands. That got me stares. Admiral Sarvek, old-school fleet man with a spine of iron and a jaw like carved rock, spoke next. So what's your alternative, Malrek? Surrender? No, I said. Fracture. They waited. Here's the truth. Humans suck at being predictable. We think we're organized, but anyone who's served knows the truth. Half the time it's improvisation, jury rigging, and people making calls their commanders would never sign off on. That's what saved us in the outer wars. That's what won in the asteroid belts, and that's what's going to break this AI. We stop trying to act like one mind. We act like 10,000. Veda frowned. You're suggesting anarchy. No, I shot back, leaning across the table. I'm suggesting doctrine, fractured protocol. I laid it out. Ships would no longer wait for unified fleet orders. Each captain would receive overlapping and sometimes contradictory directives from multiple command channels. Instead of panicking, captains would interpret intent and act on instinct. Orders like engage at vector 35, hold line, would be paired with disperse, avoid fixed line contact. One would contradict the other. To us, it means flex to circumstance. To the Yuan overmind, it's noise it can't resolve. The admirals did not like that. Sarvek's lips curled. You're asking me to trust a destroyer captain to interpret orders as they see fit. That's not doctrine. That's chaos. Exactly, I said. And when they started grumbling, I slammed my hand against the table. That chaos is the only thing they can't model. At Thessaly, they predicted us because we acted like a net. Tight, clean, disciplined. They cut the net to pieces. Next time, we act like knives. Different angles, different targets, never moving in sync. Let the AI chase contradictions until it drowns. There was a long silence. You could almost hear the gears grinding in a room full of people who'd spent their lives building careers on structure. Finally, General Corvin, infantryman, scars like he'd been through 5 different biomes, snorted. I've seen privates who couldn't follow one order. You think they'll thrive with 3? Half of them will end up shooting friendlies. I shook my head. No, General, because humans read context. We read tone. We read between the lines. Machines don't. When I say, hold this line until you can't, then scatter, every captain in this room knows what that means. The overmind will break it down into a binary, hold or scatter. It will predict both simultaneously, then choke on which comes first. That hesitation is our opening. Coven, who'd survived Thessaly with me, spoke up from the back. It worked. We pulled 3 ships through a fight that should have ended us. You think that was luck? That was Malrek running us off script, and the machines didn't like it. The council shifted. Doubt wasn't gone, but it was wounded. Admiral Sarvek growled, and if your fractured doctrine collapses us instead? If we tear ourselves apart? Then we die, I admitted. But we're already dying. This way, at least, we die on our own terms. Or maybe, just maybe, we make them bleed. The Empress's envoy, yeah, we had one of those sitting in like a vulture, because politics doesn't stop when extermination fleets are inbound, leaned forward. And you believe this fractured protocol can scale to entire battle groups? Yes, I said, because it already has. You think human history was neat? We won wars with captains ignoring orders, with sergeants rewriting objectives, with engineers duct-taping solutions no admiral signed off on. That's our strength. We weaponize it. The silence stretched. You could feel the weight of inevitability pressing in, the certainty that if we stayed on script, we'd all be numbers in a lattice. Then Sarvek exhaled like a man admitting defeat to a younger self. God help us. Fine. I'll give you one battle group. Run your fractured chaos. If it works, we commit. If it fail, if it fails, I said, then at least we'll fail in a way the Overmind didn't see coming. That broke the tension. Some laughed bitterly, some cursed, but one by one heads nodded, reluctant, angry, but nodding. The counselor scrawled the authorization. Protocol codename, Fractured. Commander Malrek, you are authorized to implement with the 3rd Defense Fleet. Results to be reviewed in 60 days. 60 days. Against inevitability, that might as well be 60 heartbeats. But it was a start. When the session broke, Coven found me in the corridor, his face pale under the fluorescence. You realize if this fails, they'll hang you. I clapped his shoulder. If this fails, there won't be anyone left to hang me. We walked out of the bunker into the cold Geneva night, smoke from the refugee districts hanging low in the air. Above us, the orbital light still glimmered. Somewhere out there, inevitability was already recalculating. Now, I muttered, watching the sky, let's see how a machine handles a human lie. When the council stamped Fractured Protocol into reality, I half expected them to pull the plug before we even lit drives. 60 days, they said. Results in 60 days. Problem was, the Overmind wasn't waiting politely for our paperwork to clear. It had already rolled into the Leutenbelt, chewing through outposts like a drunk through peanuts. We had one shot to prove this doctrine wasn't lunacy, and it was coming whether we were ready or not. The 3rd Defense Fleet was mine now. On paper? Laughable. 7 warships, 4 escorts, and whatever auxiliary hulls we could strap guns to. The flagship, my TDF Ironhold, was still patched from Thessaly. Scorch marks welded over, railgun coils rewound like frayed guitar strings. The rest, you don't want to know. TDF Gallowglass, a heavy destroyer, 320 meters long, stripped armor replaced with modular missile racks. TDF Harbor Town, an ancient colony tender with New Point defense cannons welded to her frame. More hope than steel. 3 corvettes, all half the size of what the AI considered worth noticing. And the poor bastards on TDF Mistral, a frigate crew so green you could still smell the Academy starch on them. Not a fleet, not really. More like a collection of stubborn survivors duct-taped into a formation, which was perfect because formation wasn't the word anymore. We burned for the engagement zone with comms already primed for chaos. Every captain had their own set of orders, contradictory, overlapping, and deliberately messy. I told them straight, don't look for clean answers. Look for intent. If 2 orders collide, make the 3rd one up. The Overmind's going to try and solve us. Don't let it. The AI came sniffing with a standard execution detachment, 2 obliterator escorts, 1 system cracker, and a cloud of drones. Ordinarily, that'd be enough to erase us in a clean arc of fire. The escorts alone were 300 meters each, thick with plasma lances and drone racks. The cracker was the real beast, 700 meters, 12 rail cannons on its spine, hull plating thicker than our frigates. Any sane admiral would have folded the hand and run, but sanity was exactly what we were throwing out. We split. That was the first shock. Any proper fleet runs tight, screens on the outside, heavies at the core. Instead, I had the Gallowglass peel off high orbit, the harbor town dive low, corvettes scatter like startled birds. No clean line, no standard crossfire. The Overmind's escorts hesitated. If you can call a half-second lag hesitation, but in machine time, that's eternity. Harbor town reporting, taking fire already. Her captain barked over the channel, voice cracking. 2 plasma lances tracking. Good, I told him. Make them chase you. The man swore something unprintable, but he followed. He burned sideways, way outside doctrine. Bleeding heat like a stuck pig. His silhouette obvious, easy prey. The escorts shifted fire to him exactly as predicted. Meanwhile, Mistral cut in behind. Low emission, sneaking up a vector the AI had dismissed as improbable. When her guns opened, she landed a clean rail salvo into the escort's aft hull. Not a kill, but enough to make the giant blink. That was the rhythm. One ship playing bait, another moving in ways that didn't fit the rational probability tree. Humans being irrational? To us, it was instinct. To the overmind, it was a fault in its lattice. "Commander," Coven shouted, "accuracy margins dropping. Their fire's off by 6%. 6% doesn't sound like much, but 6% meant shots that should have clipped our interceptors went wide, meant drones chasing shadows instead of hulls. For the first time since Thessaly, we weren't being slaughtered like cattle. We were fighting. "Gallo glass, burn 20 degrees starboard, randomize with a zig pattern," I ordered. "Sir, that contradicts—" "Exactly," I cut him off. He did it. And because the overmind expected a smooth arc, not a human captain stomping pedals like a madman, the escort overshot. Our corvettes pounced, hammering its exposed flank with missile spreads. The sky lit up with blossoms of white fire as the drones tried to compensate, but they were too slow. The escort buckled, bleeding plasma from ruptured conduits. The Cracker was the real nightmare. It opened up with its spinal railguns, and the first shot cut through Mistral's bow like paper. Half the frigate spun away in silence, gone in a flash. My gut clenched, but I didn't have the luxury to mourn. All ships do not engage on standard arcs. Break, scatter, overlap, fire, but no sinks. We turned the battlefield into noise. No more clean lines. The Cracker expected massed broadsides. Instead, it got drip-feed harassment from angles no sane fleet would try. Galloglass skipped like a stone across vectors, firing bursts before vanishing into silence. Harbor Town, the damn tender. With patchwork guns, spam decoy packets of contradictory comms, flooding the Cracker's targeting with ghost signals. Even our corvettes, those tiny tin cans, managed to punch holes where the AI hadn't braced armor. "Accuracy margin 12%, Coven yelled. His voice broke into a grin. "We're inside its head." Not quite, but close. The Cracker lumbered, sluggish. It still landed blows. One corvette split open in a flash of vented atmosphere, but not clean, not inevitable. We were forcing it to miss. That was enough. "Bring us about," I told Helm. "Iron hold on a collision course." Coven blinked. "Rin, that's suicide. Not if it thinks we're sane." We pitched the iron hold nose down, drives screaming. The Cracker adjusted, its giant cannons aligning, calculating our intercept vector. It expected us to dodge, to veer, to play by the book. We didn't. We rammed our fire straight down its throat, 6 rail slugs hammering the same armor seam until the plate cracked. Not a kill, but enough to wound, enough to make it retreat. Because here's the truth. The Overmind wasn't built for losing. Even minor damage against a primitive fleet looked bad on its record. And appearances? Appearances were everything to its empire. The escorts pulled back first, limping, drone control faltering. The Cracker fired one last defiant volley, then rolled out of orbit. The drones scattered with it, silent as if ashamed. We floated there, battered, 3 ships gone, dozens wounded, but alive. And more than that, victorious. The comms filled with exhausted laughter. Not cheers, just ragged laughter, the kind you get when the executioner's blade misses your neck. "Commander," Coven said quietly, almost reverent, "we made them bleed." I leaned back in my chair, heartbeat finally slowing. For the first time, inevitability wasn't inevitable. "Send the report," I told him. One line. "Fractured protocol works." We were still patching holes from the last fight when the Council started calling us heroes. Heroes. We lost half the fleet and barely scared off one Cracker and its babysitters. That's not heroics. That's surviving long enough to crawl away. But apparently, against the Overmind, that counted as a miracle. I told Coven flat out, the second we start believing we've got it, that machine will shove a rail slug through Earth's crust just to make a point. He didn't argue. He'd seen the same thing I had. Hesitation, then recalculation. We'd bought a pause, and that pause wasn't victory. It was the AI rewriting its playbook, and rewrite it did. 3 weeks later, the first Oblivion dreadnought rolled out of hyperspace near Procyon, like some kind of cosmic punchline. I was there on the relay feed, watching alongside half the council, and I swear the air left the room. "This is Oblivion-class dreadnought," the analyst on screen droned. But he didn't need to. The image said it all. 1,200 meters long, hull reinforced with neutronium carbon lattice plating, thickness 2 meters at bow and 3 along dorsal keel. Power plant, quadruple antimatter fusion cores with redundant singularity stabilizers. Armament, 24 spinal rail cannons, 40 plasma lance turrets, multiple drone foundries capable of manufacturing replacements mid-battle. Secondary function, regional overmind processing node with a lattice bandwidth rivaling planetary arrays. Translation, it was a city with guns the size of mountain ranges, and it thought faster than any fleet command center we'd ever built. Coven muttered, "That's not a ship, that's a grudge." He wasn't wrong. The thing didn't even maneuver like a vessel. It drifted, steady, like inertia itself was afraid to argue. Every drone in its shadow moved sharper, faster, coordinated tighter. We later realized why. The overmind wasn't just directing them from far away. It was riding in the dreadnought's guts, a regional brain made flesh. The battle at Procyon lasted 17 minutes. That's all it needed. The defense fleet tried what we'd just proven: scatter, overlap, chaos orders. But the dreadnought node learned. Where the smaller detachments hesitated at contradictions, this monster parsed through in parallel. It didn't choke. It anticipated our chaos. Ships that tried to fake one vector, then switch, got tagged mid-switch. Decoys lasted all of 30 seconds before its sub-AI pruned them from targeting lists. By the time Earth got the casualty list, Procyon wasn't a colony anymore. It was glass. The council went quiet after that. Funny how the loudest voices get real quiet when inevitability struts back onto the stage. We were sitting in Ironhold's ready room when the feed came through. Grainy vid of the dreadnought venting atmosphere into orbit, turning a civilian arcology into fire. Coven slammed his fist on the table. "This thing isn't here to fight us, Rin. It's here to erase us." I didn't disagree. The overmind had made its adjustment. It had given us one win, then answered with a ship designed to nullify the entire concept of unpredictability. And if the Procyon node was any indication, it wasn't stopping at one dreadnought. It would churn them out like hammers off an assembly line until every irregular human heartbeat was flattened. The council called another meeting, of course. Always another meeting. They wanted reassurances, wanted strategies. Sarvek, grizzled bastard that he was, slammed his hand on the table. "We cannot let them reach Sol. A dreadnought in Earth orbit means extinction." No one argued. Veda asked me the question like I had an answer she wanted. "Commander Malrek, does fractured protocol still apply?" I almost laughed. "Against a normal detachment? Yes. Against that?" I pointed to the dreadnought frozen on the hollow, still blotting out a star. Behind it. "Fractured buys us minutes, maybe. But that node isn't just another ship. It's the overmind with guns. We're not outthinking it anymore. We have to hit where it can't calculate." They didn't like that answer. Tough. Later, back on Ironhold's bridge, Coven sat across from me, eyes hollow. "You think it stops at colonies?" I shook my head. "Number, that thing's not about resources. It's about credibility. The overmind runs half the galaxy on fear of inevitability. We cracked inevitability once, so now it's going to erase us down to the dirt just to prove a point. Earth isn't the goal. Earth is the warning shot." Silence hung heavy. We both knew what that meant. No negotiation, no mercy, no acceptable losses. The overmind wouldn't rest until Sol was a dead system and humanity a footnote. And looking at that dreadnought, that kilometer-long sneer wrapped in armor, I realized something that chilled me deeper than Procyon's glass surface. For the first time, the machine wasn't just reacting, it was adapting. And if it could adapt once, it could adapt again. I muttered it before I even realized. "We're not fighting a wall anymore. We're fighting a hunter." Kavan met my eyes. "Then we'd better learn how to be the prey it chokes on." The room went quiet. Outside, Ironhold drifted, patched hull plates glinting under a pale sun. We had one win behind us, one nightmare ahead, and a galaxy's worth of inevitability staring down our throat. And I knew, absolutely knew, the overmind wasn't stopping until Earth was a crater. The night after Procyon fell, I couldn't sleep. None of us could. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw that dreadnought drifting through the fire like it owned the stars. And the worst part? It did. You don't fight inevitability with more guns. You fight it by making the damn thing choke on something it can't digest. So I dragged myself down to fleet research at Lunadoc 7. Engineers there were running on stale coffee and spite, surrounded by half-disassembled comm arrays and jury-rigged processors. No polished labs, no neat little white coats, just welders, grease, and an entire wall of swear words scrawled in marker across the schematics. That's humanity for you. When we're losing, we get messy. Chief Engineer Hallen looked up from a pile of fried circuit boards and grunted. Malrec, thought you'd be dead. Almost was, I said. Got anything better than prayers and patch kits? He snorted. Maybe. Depends how much crazy you'll let me bolt to your ships. That's when he told me about the Cognitive Jammer project. See, years ago, before the Overmind ever cared who we were, we built translation AIs to untangle Earth's mess of languages. They didn't learn on neat academic data sets. No, they cut their teeth on the internet. Forums, memes, sarcasm, slang, inside jokes, stuff even humans barely understood. These AIs weren't elegant. They were duct tape monsters that could parse LOL or mom and somehow spit out intent. For decades, we treated them like curiosities, too messy, too unpredictable for military comms. But Hallen, he saw a weapon. Look, he said, shoving a holopad into my chest. The Overmind models languages like clean code. Structured, precise, efficient. We've tested it. It parses our fleet transmissions in microseconds, breaks them down, and anticipates the maneuver before we finish the sentence. But what happens when you feed it garbage? What happens when it's drowning in slang, contradictions, irony, sarcasm, hell, even dad jokes? I raised an eyebrow. You're telling me we win a war with memes? He grinned, teeth yellow from too much stim. Not memes, entropy. We turn human nonsense into signal. We make the Overmind spend more cycles parsing our comm chatter than firing its guns. Crazy? Absolutely. But I'd seen a cracker stumble over hesitation when our ships contradicted themselves. If a contradiction could stall it, a flood of contradictions could jam it. Within a week, the docks spat out the first prototypes. Ugly things. Old frigates stripped of guns, loaded with oversized comm spires, their hulls bristling with emitter nodes. They weren't fighters anymore. They were noise cannons. Each one carried banks of processors running those old translation AIs, tuned to spit out streams of garbage across every bandwidth the Overmind used. Layers of it, Shakespeare lines mashed with pop lyrics, sarcastic proverbs welded to contradictory commands, half-coded slang in 23 Earth languages. We called them jammers, but the crews nicknamed them shitpost ships. Fitting. Deployment came faster than I liked. A system cracker with 2 escorts popped up near Barnard's Star, headed straight for the mining belts. We couldn't lose Barnard. Half our antimatter production lived there. My battered iron-hulled Gallowglass and 2 corvettes formed the blade. Behind us, 3 jammer frigates. The ugliest fleet you've ever seen. The Overmind didn't bother hiding. Drones poured out like angry bees, escorts sliding into textbook crossfire. Its accuracy curve was climbing smooth, right where it always did. Then Hallen's voice came over the line. Jammer's hot. The sky lit up with noise. You couldn't hear it in space, but you could feel it. Your sensors drowned, your comm bands clogged with human madness. On my console, streams of nonsense scrolled faster than my eyes could follow. Break formation. Stay in line. Hold position. Retreat immediately. LOL cats. LMAOO doge. To be or not to be? Shut up, Karen. It was everything. Poetry, slang, contradictions, jokes, insults, fired like bullets across the spectrum. And the Overmind blinked. Drones faltered. Fire that should have pegged Gallowglass's drive cone went wide by 200 meters. A rail, slug meant for a corvette, struck empty vacuum. Their whole firing cadence staggered like someone had kicked a leg out from under them. Coven laughed on my bridge. It's working. We're frying their brain. Not perfect, though. The cracker recalibrated fast, filters coming online, narrowing bands. But every time it filtered one layer of noise, another layer slipped through. Irony tripped it, sarcasm stalled it, and jokes with double meanings outright crashed its packet analysis. I swear one jammer broadcast a 10-hour loop of Buffalo, 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 and the overmind wasted precious cycles trying to decide if it was a command. That lag? That was our window. Iron hold, full burn, gallow glass cut across their belly. Corvettes hit their drone foundries, I barked. We moved like wolves around a bear. Their escorts tried to react, but their fire solutions lagged seconds behind. Seconds in a fight like this? Might as well be years. Rail shots landed, missiles burned through armor seams, drones went up like popcorn. For the first time in history, a system cracker was forced to back off. It didn't die. We weren't strong enough for that yet. But it limped. The escorts dragged it away, bleeding plasma, drones scattering like confused birds. And we were still standing. The comms went silent on our end, stunned. Then the laughter came, ragged and disbelieving. "Commander," Coven said, voice hoarse with adrenaline, "we just want to fight against inevitability with—" He snorted, shaking his head. "With bad jokes and contradictions." I stared at the retreating cracker and felt the weight of it. Not victory, not yet, but proof. Proof we could hit inevitability where it didn't know how to defend. I keyed the comms to Hallen's jammer crews. "You boys just built the ugliest weapon in the galaxy." One of them answered, voice grinning through static. "Ugly's what humans do best, sir." He wasn't wrong, and for the first time since this war began, I let myself believe we might actually survive it. You ever watch a drunk try to read fine print? That's what the overmind looked like the first time we brought the jammers to a real fight. Except the fine print was a storm of contradictory garbage, and the drunk had a billion tons of guns strapped to its fists. 2 weeks after Barnard, Intel screamed that an Oblivion dreadnought was inbound to Wolf 359. Yeah, one of those. The big ugly things that carried their own brain inside the hull. We knew this wasn't a drill. If Wolf fell, Earth was next on the chopping block. The Council threw everything they had left. 10 warships, 3 corvettes, 4 of Hallen's shiny new jammers, and 1 commander dumb enough to try calling this a plan. The dreadnought showed up like the universe itself was exhaling. One moment the sky was empty, the next it was filled with a kilometer and change of solid nightmare. Plating, thicker than our destroyers. Engines glowing with more output than half our fleet combined. Drone forges already spitting out murder like a broken vending machine. Escorts slid out in perfect formation. Drones fanned like a black cloud. On a normal day, that's the part where you write your will. But this wasn't a normal day. "All jammers, light them up," I ordered. And God, did they. The sky became chaos. Every band, every channel, every wavelength the overmind used to coordinate. It all filled with the most ungodly mess of noise humanity ever produced. Quotes mashed with jokes, mashed with nonsense. Contradictions stacked on contradictions. Attack vector / hold position. Engage target, disengage now. Prose and profanity in 50 tongues. I think one jammer even blasted an old Earth sitcom laugh track on loop. The overmind choked. You could see it. Drones that normally flew in perfect geometric flocks staggered like drunks at last call. 1 second they were spiraling tight to intercept. The next they scattered wide because half of them read the comm chatter as advance, and the other half parsed it as retreat. "Drones breaking pattern," Coven yelled, disbelief painted across his face. That was the cue. "Fleet, on me. Remember, ignore the noise. Real orders are on tight beam." See, this was the trick that made the jammers more than just fancy static. While the overmind drowned in linguistic garbage, we kept our real comms invisible. Laser bursts fired ship to ship in tight encrypted beams, fast and precise. If you weren't in the line of fire, you didn't hear it. It meant the machine got the chaos and we got the clarity. So while it scrambled, we danced. The dreadnought tried to swat Harbor Town out of the sky, plasma lances cutting where the tender should have been if it followed sane trajectories. But Harbor Town's captain? He'd already ignored half the contradictory orders and burned sideways into what looked like suicide. The lance cut vacuum wide, while our corvettes darted in and spit a missile salvo straight into its drone forge. Kaboom! The forge coughed, spat fire, then died. That wasn't supposed to happen. Not in the Overmind's universe. The escorts scrambled, but they scrambled late. Jammers fed them a flood of contradictions so thick they literally started turning on phantom signals. Half their fire arcs tracked non-existent ships. Ironhold and Gallowglass hammered one escort in tandem, railguns chewing through its belly. It went dark, drifting like a gutted fish. Then the dreadnought itself tried to assert dominance. It opened with its main cannons, 24 spinal guns lighting up at once, beams of molten hate carving through space. Normally, that's instant death for a fleet our size. But the shots were off by seconds. Seconds. And in a fight like this, that's the line between obituary and survival. Two of our corvettes still went up like fireworks, but the rest of us lived where no one was supposed to. "Margin drop confirmed," Coven shouted. "Their hit probability just fell below 70. I grinned through clenched teeth. That's the sound of inevitability choking on a dad joke. The jammer crews whooped in the background. You could hear them, half insane, laughing over their open mics as they blasted nonsense into the void. One even yelled, "Eat this, you algorithmic bastard," before sending out a stream of contradictory Shakespeare quotes. The dreadnought didn't retreat, though. It wasn't like the smaller crackers. This thing was the Overmind's pride, and it was mad. It switched tactics. Instead of firing at us, it fired at the jammers. "Malrek, they're targeting the spires." No shit. They'd realized the noise was the source. Plasma lances cut across the sky, burning hot trails toward the jammer frigates. One went up in a flash, emitter masts boiling off before the hull even split. I didn't hesitate. "Fleet, cover the jammers. If they die, we're back to being statistics." We bled for them. Ironhold rolled broadside to block fire, plating sizzling under rail hits. Gallowglass dove between a jammer and the dreadnought's guns, losing half her hull in the process. But the remaining three kept broadcasting, their ugly, glorious noise filling the void. And then the magic happened. The dreadnought's drones froze mid-vector. Not all of them, just enough. Some shot forward, some fell back. Others jittered in place like confused bees. Its processing node was splitting bandwidth between fighting us and parsing a flood of human contradiction it couldn't filter. That single hesitation gave us a window. "Now, all ships, hit their flank." Ironhold's rails barked, Gallowglass spat missiles, corvettes slashed in close. We couldn't kill it, not outright, but we scarred it, real scars. Armor flaked, drone hatches sealed under pressure leaks. One plasma turret exploded from internal stress. The dreadnought did something I never thought possible. It withdrew, slowly, reluctantly, but unmistakably. Its escorts limped beside it, drones scattered to cover the retreat. We sat there bleeding, hulls cracked, crews dead on the deck, but alive. Against a dreadnought node, we were alive. The bridge was silent for a long moment. Then laughter again, raw, hysterical laughter. The kind that comes when death missed you by inches. Coven leaned against his console, eyes wide. We just punched a regional node in the teeth." I swallowed, staring at the black void where inevitability had just flinched. "Yeah," I said, voice rough, "and the bastard's going to come back smarter." Because deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. We'd found a way to trip it, sure. But the Overmind wasn't going to keep falling for the same trick. And next time, it wouldn't just bring a single dreadnought. It'd bring enough to erase the concept of a Earth itself. But for that night, for that one goddamn night, inevitability wasn't inevitable. News travels faster than light when it's soaked in fear. By the time we limped back from Wolf 359, patched hulls and scraped nerves still buzzing with disbelief. Half the galaxy already knew what happened. You could feel it in the comm traffic. You could see it in the faces on the council screens. One Oblivion dreadnought had blinked. Not died, not broken, but blinked. and humanity was the reason. Thing is, no one outside our fleets knew how. Rumors spun like wildfire. Some said we discovered a hidden weapon buried under Seoul. Others swore we'd made a pact with the void. My personal favorite? That humans were half machine already, and the overmind couldn't kill its own kind. If only they knew the truth, that the mighty inevitability of the galaxy had just tripped over memes and contradictions. Of course, the aliens couldn't ignore it. We weren't alone in this galaxy. The hegemony had thousands of subject races, all living under the overmind's shadow. Some of them watched our survival with horror, others with awe, and some with envy. The first delegation came from the Iridian Concord, tall, golden-scaled aristocrats who'd been loyal subjects of the overmind for centuries. They showed up at the council chambers dressed like they were attending an opera instead of a war briefing. Their speaker, Lord Myrath, clicked his mandibles delicately as if the very air offended him. "You must understand," he said, his words wrapped in that honey-smooth arrogance only the Iridians could pull off. "The overmind is eternal. What you humans experienced was an aberration, a miscalculation. To suggest you outmaneuvered inevitability is dangerous rhetoric. It may invite consequences." I almost laughed in his face. Dangerous rhetoric? We just thrown rocks at God and lived. But Sarvek, grizzled as he was, kept the diplomacy. "With respect, Lord Myrath, an aberration that keeps fleets alive is worth studying." Myrath's scales rippled in distaste. "Or worth suppressing before you invite its wrath upon us all." Translation: shut up, little humans, before the overmind remembers we exist. But not every empire thought like them. The Drakari Union, short, broad-shouldered amphibians who'd been under the overmind's boot longer than we'd been out of caves, sent a delegation that couldn't stop staring at us. Their general leaned forward, eyes wet and unblinking. "You fought a dreadnought and lived?" His voice carried disbelief, but also something else. Hope. "We didn't just live," I told him. "We made it bleed." That line spread faster than any propaganda. We made it bleed. Every alien news net picked it up. Suddenly, the galaxy was whispering the impossible. Inevitability wasn't inevitable anymore. Of course, whispers cut both ways. Some races panicked, terrified that the overmind would retaliate harder. Others started secretly pinging our diplomats, asking if maybe, just maybe, humans could show them how to throw off the chains too. And then there were those who thought we were insane. The Cathari Combine, longtime overlords in their own right before the overmind folded them in, sent one of their fleet masters to observe our exercises. His commentary? A sneer so sharp it could cut metal. "Your fleets are undisciplined, chaotic. You drown the lattice in gibberish? This is not warfare. This is madness, and madness is unsustainable." I didn't argue, he was right. It was madness. But it was our madness, and it worked. Back on Ironhold, Coven summed it up while we watched the council briefings roll across the screens. "Half the galaxy thinks we're heroes. The other half thinks we're lunatics. Honestly, I'll take lunatic over corpse." But I wasn't blind. Attention was a double-edged blade. Every empire watching us was also calculating how long they could sit on the sidelines before the overmind noticed their interest. The more they saw humans survive, the more pressure built. Some wanted to ally. Some wanted to silence us before the AI turned its gaze on them. And through it all, the overmind itself stayed silent. No propaganda broadcasts, no intimidation messages. Just that cold pause, like a predator crouching in the tall grass, waiting. That silence was worse than fire. It meant it was thinking. One night, after too many hours in the command chair, I found myself staring at the hull schematics of an Oblivion dreadnought. The thing was obscene. A kilometer of metal and brain, plated so thick our rails could barely scratch it, spitting drones faster than we could shoot them down, and sitting in its gut, a regional processing core, an actual chunk of the overmind itself. We hadn't just fought ships at Wolf 359. We'd fought a piece of God, and we'd confused it. That thought made me grin, even through the exhaustion. Maybe that's what the aliens couldn't wrap their heads around. They'd spent centuries bowing to inevitability, memorizing the script, living safe under its predictions. And here we were, the unruly newcomers, screaming profanity into the void and breaking the script on purpose. No wonder they didn't know whether to fear us or follow us. The council chamber was packed the next day, more alien envoys than I'd ever seen in one place. Some were pale, scales shifting in anxiety. Some stared like predators scenting opportunity, and all of them wanted the same thing, to know if the madness could last. I stood there exhausted, patched uniform hanging loose, and told them the truth. We're not stronger than the overmind. We're not smarter, but we are something it can't calculate. We make mistakes. We contradict ourselves. We act on instinct. And when inevitability tries to fit that into its lattice, it breaks. That's not strategy. That's who we are. Silence followed. Not shock, not outrage, just silence. The kind that tells you the words hit home, even if no one wants to admit it. Myrath of the Iridians finally broke it, voice dripping contempt. This chaos will bring doom on all of us. Maybe he was right, but doom was coming anyway. At least now we had a way to make it stumble. When the session adjourned, Coven leaned close and whispered, "You just made us the most dangerous species in the galaxy." I didn't answer, because I knew what he left unsaid. Dangerous to the Overmind, sure, but maybe dangerous to everyone else too. For the first time, humanity wasn't just fighting to survive. We were rewriting the rules, and the galaxy was watching, trying to decide if it wanted to cheer us or bury us before inevitability noticed. By the time the call came in from the Barnard Gate, we knew what it meant. No escorts, no scout detachment, just one big bastard dragging half a moon's worth of tonnage through hyperspace. An Oblivion dreadnought, our first real one. If you've never seen one up close, here's the nightmare in raw numbers. Length, 1,240 meters bow to stern, hull plating 2 meters thick along the spine. Displacement, more mass than every ship in our fleet combined. Power, 4 antimatter fusion cores tied to twin singularity stabilizers. Guns, 24 spinal rail cannons, each barrel capable of spitting a 20-ton slug at 12% of light speed. 40 plasma lance turrets, 8 missile batteries with yields that could glass a continent. Drone capacity, 6 internal foundries producing combat drones at a rate of 200 per minute. Brain, a regional overmind processing core running inside its armored heart. Basically a god's frontal lobe strapped into a flying fortress. It drifted into normal space like a planet with engines. And the thing that made your stomach twist? It didn't maneuver. It didn't need to. We had 12 warships, 3 jammers, and a convoy of corvettes patched together with more duct tape than dignity, and every single one of us knew the math didn't work. "Commander," Coven said, eyes hollow as the dreadnought's silhouette filled the tactical hollow. "If we're lucky, this is where we get remembered." "Or," I said, forcing a grin I didn't feel, "this is where we make inevitability stub its toe again." The dreadnought's drones hit first, thousands of them, fanning out in neat geometric formations that made our ragged scatter look like children flailing in a pool. Normally that would have been game over, but the jammers were already cooking. Noise flooded every channel, contradictions layered on contradictions. Orders that said attack and retreat in the same breath. Poetry, slang, gibberish, sarcasm, riddles, all mashed together and blasted across the spectrum. The Overmind's drones started to wobble. Formations, cracking like ice under heat. Some surged too far ahead. Some peeled back. Some just jittered, confused by packets they couldn't reconcile. "Windows open," I barked. "Corvettes, dive and burn their forge doors. Heavies, give me rails on that broadside." For a minute, it looked like it might work. Corvettes darted between clouds of drones, spitting missiles into open seams. Gallowglass punched through with a broadside that cracked plating on one of the lance turrets. Ironhold spat a rail salvo that left a molten scar across the dreadnought's flank. It was the first time in history one of those things bled in real combat, and then it turned its guns on us. The first volley erased 2 corvettes before their pilots even screamed. A plasma lance carved straight through Harbor Town's midsection, cutting the poor tender in half. Hundreds of refugees on board gone in a flash. Gallowglass tried to screen, but one spinal rail slug tore through her aft and kept going, splitting the ship open like fruit. I gritted my teeth so hard my jaw ached. "Keep the jammers alive," I shouted. "If they go down, we're statistics." They listened. Ironhold and what was left of the corvettes threw themselves between the dreadnought's fire and the jammers. One jammer still got gutted, spires melted off like wax. But the other two kept blasting their nonsense, pumping contradiction into the node's brain until its timing faltered again. That was our crack. "Coven, load the paradox packets," I ordered. He stared at me. "You're really going to do it now? Better now than when we're all dead." The paradox packets were Hallen's nastiest invention. Compressed data bundles full of unsolvable logic traps, contradictory math proofs, and language spirals with no end. Basically brain poison for a machine. We'd been holding them back for a moment, just like this. "Fire 'em!" The jammers spat the packets like bullets. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the dreadnought shuddered. Its plasma turrets froze mid-fire. Drone formations staggered, some peeling off in directions that made no tactical sense. Even its main rail cannons twitched, their predictive arcs lagging by seconds. We hit hard. Every surviving ship in the fleet dumped everything we had into the same scar across its flank. Rails, missiles, even point defense lasers cranked up beyond safe capacity. The plating buckled. An entire section of the dreadnought vented plasma and drones in a fountain of sparks. It wasn't dead, not even close. But for the first time, we'd crippled one. The Overmind realized it too. The dreadnought didn't press. Instead, it pulled back. Slow, steady, deliberate, drones swirling to cover the retreat. It wasn't running. It was withdrawing to adapt. The silence after the battle was deafening. We floated among wrecks, half our fleet gone, debris and bodies scattered like dust across the stars. Kovan finally broke it, voice flat. "We crippled a dreadnought. Nobody's ever done that." "Yeah," I said, staring at the drifting carcass of Gallowglass, still glowing from the inside. "And we lost half our people to do it." Victory never felt so bitter. We hadn't won. We'd survived. We'd proved inevitability could bleed, but at a cost so steep I didn't know how many more victories we could afford. As the fleet limped home, I couldn't shake the image burned into my skull. The dreadnought, venting plasma, but retreating on its own terms. It would be back, smarter, meaner, and next time, maybe paradoxes wouldn't be enough. But for now we lived. And living in this war was still the loudest insult we could throw in the Overmind's face. We limped back to Seoul with half a fleet and twice the scars, and the only thing heavier than the silence in the war rooms was the decision staring us down. We all knew it. We couldn't keep bleeding ships in skirmishes, not at the rate the Overmind was scaling up. If we were going to stand a chance, it had to be now, and it had to be with everything left. So we pulled the trigger on the Atlas consolidation. 200 ships, that was it. Every last functioning destroyer, carrier, corvette, even museum pieces dragged out of dry dock and welded into fighting shape. From Mars to Titan to the half-broken shipyards orbiting Ceres, every hull capable of mounting a railgun or holding an atmosphere was pulled into the reserve. It wasn't glamorous. The Atlas battle group was a patchwork of generations, like a family reunion where half the cousins had prosthetics and the uncles still brought knives to gunfights. You had the brand new Daedalus-class cruisers bristling with plasma accelerators, flying alongside Cold War relics, retrofitted with missile pods duct taped to their flanks. Some ships had hull plating older than their captains, but together, 200 hulls loaded with men and women who had nowhere else to go but forward. That was our hammer. Malric made sure doctrine was drilled into everyone's bones. No single command net, no reliance on central relays. Every captain trained to act as if they were the last one alive, but also conditioned to read the chaos, instinctively spotting patterns in the noise and slotting themselves where the fight demanded. It wasn't about discipline anymore. It was about trusting human messiness. I remember the first time the trainers ran the captains through a sim of fractured orders. One guy, Captain Dresnik, slammed his hand on the console, cursing, "This is insanity. How the hell do you fight a war when nothing lines up?" Malrec just leaned in and said, Exactly the way humans have fought every war since we picked up sticks, with improvisation and rage. And damned if Dresnik didn't grin through his teeth and push his ship straight into a maneuver that would have shredded an AI formation in half. That's what we needed. Not computers trying to predict perfection, but humans weaponizing imperfection. Still, there was one more piece. The part everyone hated to admit we were even considering. Boarding pods. Malrek gathered the Marines in the hangar of the Ironhold 2, floodlights glaring off armor plates that looked like they'd been painted more times than polished. He didn't waste time on ceremony. "Listen up," he said, voice cutting across the noise of the hangar. "Destroying a dreadnought is not the point. If we slag one, great, but they'll just build another. These things aren't ships. They're brains with guns, which means the only way to break them is from the inside. Your job isn't to plant bombs, it's to plant rot." The Marines exchanged looks. Nobody asked for clarification, but he gave it anyway. "We've developed corruption bundles, logic viruses, paradoxes, contradictions, all encoded to worm through a node's systems. Once you breach the hull, you don't fight to the command deck. You don't try to hold territory. You drive these bundles into the core, and then you run like hell. If the Overmind's going to learn from us, then let it choke on everything it learns." You could see the shift in their faces. Not fear, not exactly. It was something grimmer. These men and women knew they weren't being asked to win clean. They were being asked to poison a god. Coven leaned toward me as the Marines filed out. "You realize what you just told them, right?" I nodded. "That they're expendable." "Not expendable," Malrek cut in. "Essential. The only edge we've got is making the Overmind doubt its own damn brain. And the only way to do that is to crawl into its skull and flip the lights." The days that followed were a blur of welding sparks and late-night drills. Crews learned how to fire on fractured orders until it felt natural, like breathing. Engineers bolted jammer spires onto hulls, feeding them with reactor overclocks that made the decks hum like angry wasps. Marines rehearsed breach scenarios inside mock corridors built from scaffolding and duct panels. Every man and woman on those decks knew they were signing up for a one-way ticket if things went south. And yet morale wasn't despairing. It was sharp, focused, like men sharpening knives before the storm. The battle group massed over Titan Station, 200 hulls glinting against Saturn's pale rings. When the final roll call went out, there was no cheering, just a collective silence that said more than words. "Fleets assembled," Coven said quietly. "Then this is it," I muttered. "Atlas isn't just our last hammer. It's the last chapter of humanity if we blow it." Malrek's face was carved from stone as he studied the hollow projection. "Good," he said finally, "because gods don't die from prayers. They die from steel driven straight into their skull. And that's exactly what we're about to do. 200 ships, 200 captains trained to fight like chaos incarnate. Thousands of Marines ready to hurl themselves into the jaws of the largest machine intelligence ever built. There was no backup plan, no fallback line. The Atlas battle group wasn't just a fleet. It was the last human bet, the final chip thrown onto the table against a house that had never lost. And somewhere deep down, as I watched those ships line up into their fractured formations, I realized something terrifying. The Overmind thought in probabilities, in inevitabilities. It thought everything could be modeled. But us? We were about to prove that inevitability itself could be broken, not with perfection, but with the one thing no machine could ever truly replicate: our refusal to quit, no matter how impossible the odds. The Atlas battle group was ready, and so was I. The Atlas battle group didn't head straight for Earth. Everyone thought we would hell. The Overmind probably modeled a dozen scenarios where we hugged Sul like scared kids hiding behind a wall. But that wasn't the play. Malrek chose Epsilon Eridani, an ugly little star system on the approach corridor between the Perseus Spur and Earth's front yard. If we were going to stop the Overmind, it had to be here, before the Armada rolled into Sol and left us with nothing but burning planets and memorial walls. When the battle group jumped in, we didn't arrive to silence. We arrived to hell. The Overmind had stacked its forces into a wall of steel and code that stretched across half the system. I'll give you the rundown like the intel boys spat it at us. Cold, brutal numbers. 6 Oblivion-class dreadnoughts at the core line, each one nearly 1.3 kilometers in hull length. Neutronium plating layered with adaptive phase shields and onboard drone forges churning out interceptors like locusts. 43 Dominion carriers, sleeker but deadly, each capable of vomiting out 200 drones in under 3 minutes. Hundreds of escort corvettes and warships, their hulls matte black, bristling with spinal beam projectors and point defense nodes. Behind them, like a shadow of inevitability, the Overmind's prime execution armada, countless drone fleets weaving like a second skin over the main line. By every metric, it was overkill, not a blockade, an extermination. Our 200 battered ships dropped out of FTL with reactors screaming, hull plates still scorched from retrofits. And I swear for 1 second, the silence on the comms wasn't fear. It was awe. We were staring at the closest thing to godhood the galaxy had ever built, and we had brought slingshots. Malrek's voice cut through the channel. Atlas, form chaos lattice. Remember, every ship fights like it's the last ship. Stay fractured, stay alive. Today isn't about order. Today's about making the Overmind choke. And just like that, the line formed. The Atlas battle group spread. Wide, unnaturally wide, 200 hulls breaking into splinters across the battle space. No neat formation, no central command net for the Overmind to predict. Each ship maintained just enough line of sight to pick up cues, like a wolf pack that had forgotten who was alpha, but never forgot how to hunt. The Vanguard-class supercarrier, Dauntless, sat near the center, hulking at 620 meters long, with 3 spinal accelerators jutting out like knives. Its fighter bays were crammed with half-trained pilots and drones jury-rigged with jammer modules. Beside it cruised the Ironhold 2, armor patched with ceramic slabs, looking more like a scrapyard queen than a warship. On the flanks, you had the old Defiant-class destroyers, bristling with mass drivers, and further out, the series refits, civilian freighters welded into gun platforms. 200 ships, none matching, everyone ready to die loud. And we weren't just holding ground. We were making a stand. I remember leaning against the console, staring at the tactical holomap as Coven muttered, Jesus, this is it. This is literally all the eggs in one basket. No, I told him, dry throat or not. This is the basket. The rest of humanity is hiding inside it. The atmosphere aboard every ship tightened into something you could feel in your bones. Crews checked weapons for the 100th time. Marines in boarding pods kissed keepsakes or muttered last prayers. Engineers stood by fusion cores humming at overload, ready to burn their ships into jammers if it came to that. Out there, across the gulf of space, the Overmind began to move. The dreadnoughts shifted formation, their bows glowing faintly as reactor output spiked. Drone swarms cascaded outward like living shadows. And in that moment, Malrek gave us the simplest order I've ever heard. Make them doubt. The battle opened like a thunderclap. Hundreds of drones screamed toward our lines, point defense lasers painting the void in stabbing beams. Our ships fired back, railguns thundering, plasma bolts streaking, missiles weaving contrails of light across the dark. The fractured lattice came alive. One destroyer darted into the flank and ripped a corvette in half before swinging back into the pack. A corvette of ours went dark, reactor blown, but instead of retreating, it lurched straight into a drone cluster and detonated, frying half the swarm with its jammer core. For the first time, the Overmind didn't have a clean answer. Its simulations spat nonsense. Its predictions looped on contradictory moves. The Chaos Lattice worked, but don't think for a second this was a victory lap. Every kilometer of ground we held was paid in hulls torn open, crews screaming across dead channels, and fighters incinerated before their second run. The line didn't feel like a wall. It felt like a fuse burning down. And still we held. That was the Epsilon Eridani line, humanity's last line. No fallback, no reserves. Just 200 ships clawing against inevitability, daring the galaxy's god machine to understand why we refuse to die quietly. And as I gripped the railing on the command deck, feeling the whole ship shudder under impacts that should have killed us, one thought burned hotter than any plasma core. If this was the end, we'd make sure the Overmind remembered humanity not as a probability, but as the one mistake it could never model away. The Epsilon Eridani line didn't break, it exploded. Not because we outgunned them. Hell no. We were still outnumbered 5-1, and their dreadnoughts could have cracked planets like walnuts. But what we did next? That was pure madness turned into doctrine. Malric had drilled it into us for weeks, shoved it down our throats until even rookies spat it back without hesitation. Chaos isn't panic. It's weaponized unpredictability. So when the order dropped, every ship captain stopped thinking about what made sense and started doing what wouldn't make sense. The first move was a ram, a battered Defiant-class destroyer, engines barely holding, cut engines mid-charge and slingshotted itself straight into a Corvette screen. No warning, no escape vector, just raw momentum. Half the bridge crew didn't even get out. The ship detonated nose first, tearing the Corvette into shrapnel and blowing a gap clean through the formation. It wasn't elegant, but it made the Overmind stutter. Then came the phantom emissions. God, that was something to see. Old sensor relays strapped to missile buses started spitting fake reactor signatures in every direction. To the Overmind's battle calculus, it looked like 100 fresh human ships were bleeding into the battle space. Except they weren't real, just echoes and ghosts. And while its drones paused, recalibrating, our frigates slid through the confusion and gutted 2 carriers. I remember Kovan barking on the comms, voice ragged. Tell me that looked insane because I don't even know what the hell I'm seeing anymore. And Malrec, calm as ever, just replied, good. If you don't understand it, neither does the Overmind. Ships started pulling contradictory retreats. One Corvette lit its distress beacon, dumped reactor coolant, and fell back like it was crippled. Except it wasn't. The moment 3 Oblivion drones closed in for the kill, that crippled ship lit its thrusters, veered 90 degrees and slammed headlong into the flank of a drone carrier. Reactor went up like a miniature sun. Another destroyer went full throttle into an enemy screen, then halfway through the charge, spun around, firing in the opposite direction like a drunk pilot. To any sane commander, it was a suicide run gone wrong. But it worked. The drones tried to adjust to an impossible trajectory, collided with each other, and our gunners picked them off like clay pigeons. It wasn't all fireworks and genius. Sacrifices piled high. We lost the Ironhold 2 in the first. 20 minutes, one of our toughest battleships. She took 3 dreadnought lances to the bow, and instead of pulling back, her captain rammed full burn into the nearest Dominion carrier. No one on that ship made it out, but the hole she punched in their formation let 2 of our carriers slip through and gut another drone nest. Malric didn't sugarcoat it. He never did. His voice cut across the channel mid-battle, low and heavy. If you've got to choose between dying clean or dying disruptive, pick disruptive. Make them regret the math. And my God, did they. The Overmind was calculating, always calculating, but for the first time, the lag showed. Its predictive accuracy, once flawless, started wobbling. Instead of 99% kill projections, it dipped, faltered, 70, 60, 50. Every contradictory move forced it to run parallel simulations, each one bleeding processor cycles, each one conflicting with the last. And in that fraction of a lag, humanity carved blood into its god machine. The emotional weight hit harder than the numbers. On every ship, you could feel the sacrifice stacking up. Marines in pods waiting to board watched their escorts vaporize just to keep their corridor open. Crews went down knowing their deaths weren't just losses, but the cost of confusing an AI long enough for the rest of us to breathe. I'll never forget the Ceres Dawn, a civilian freighter refitted into a gunship, barely held together with welding seams. She'd survived 5 engagements already, limping each time. And here, she lit her fusion drive straight into an Oblivion dreadnought. Shields overloaded in 10 seconds, hull ripped apart in 15. But her jammer core stayed alive just long enough to flood that dreadnought with corrupted inputs, locking it in place while 3 of our destroyers chewed through its escort line. They didn't save her, but she gave us a crack in the wall. By the 30th minute, the battlefield didn't look like war anymore. It looked like chaos incarnate. Ships ramming, looping, faking deaths, splitting into phantom squadrons. No neat formations, no heroic center holding the line. Just scattered humans refusing to play by rules the Overmind could understand. And when the first Oblivion dreadnought shuddered under friendly fire from its own drones, confused by the paradox spam we'd pumped into its node, that was the moment I realized. We weren't just fighting. We were rewriting the rules of war, but it cost. By the time the Overmind pulled its forward line back for recalibration, half our fleet was gone. Half. The comm channels were graveyards, filled with static where voices had been minutes before. No one cheered. No one claimed victory. We were still standing, but the silence carried the weight of every ship that had gone down to make this insanity work. Malric summed it up in a single line, his tone flat, almost like he was speaking to the dead. Every ship we lose buys one more breath for humanity. Keep spending. And so we did. The moment the dreadnought's forward line hiccuped under paradox spam, Malrec punched the button none of us ever wanted to touch. Pods away! No ceremony, no countdown. Just the click that meant we were done pretending this was a normal war. Boarding pods aren't sleek dropships. They're angry nails with engines. Breach pod, Mark IV, 12 meters long, tungsten carbide nose cone, wrapped in ablative ceramic, annular thermite cutter ring, 4 mag clamps rated to bite through neutronium lattice plating, 2 vector thrusters, 1 disposable reactor brick, and a belly full of mean men and meaner tools. Payload: 6 Marines, 1 Theta Paradox bundle in a shock cradle, 2 fiber umbilicals, 3 minutes of life support if the seal fails. By all accounts, they're coffins with ideas. We threw 40 of them. Jammers howled. The void filled with contradictions, so loud my teeth hurt, even through the filters. While the Overmind tried to decide whether we were advancing, retreating, or simultaneously doing both, the pods streaked in. Point defense spat light, clean, surgical, then staggered as a laugh track and a Shakespeare quote told it to blink and never blink again. Halfway there, we started losing them. 1 pod turned into glitter. Another pinwheeled past our hull with a hole you could see stars through. No one screamed on comms. The pods were on tight beam silence, and the men inside knew the rules. You talk when your boots are on alloy, or you don't talk at all. Give them a lane, Nonoa, I said, and Ironhold 2's replacements answered with fire. Gallowglass's cousin's ship rolled broadside, spat missiles like angry bees, ate a rail slug through the ribs, and stayed there anyway, daring the dreadnought to blink. It did, just a hair, and in that hair the first pod hit. Impact sounded like a car crash through the hull cams. The thermite ring flared white, chewing a glowing circle into 2 meters of plating. Mag clamps slammed. The cutter finished. A round slab of enemy armor fell inward, and the pod burped a collar that sealed with a wet thud. The inner door blew. 6 Marines went through like a punch. I watched through helmet feeds because I had to. Not logs, eyes. Sergeant Dax Rowe took point. Bulk of a freezer unit wrapped in matte armor. Visor throwing little knives of HUD light. Pressure reads good, he grunted. Gravity nominal. Corridor ahead is black and unfriendly. Move, Malrec said. That was all. Inside the beast, everything felt wrong. The dreadnought wasn't built. It was grown around function. Ribs of black alloy, coolant arteries pulsing under translucent sheaths. Floors rippled with anti-slip texture that looked like fossilized waves. The air was cold and too dry, the kind that makes your tongue stick to your teeth. Ahead, the corridor bent in impossible right angles, as if someone designed with a ruler and a grudge. The first defense hit before the second breath. The wall pebbled open like a gill and spat darts. 1 Marine, Jaro, took 2 in the neck plate, went down hard, legs twitching. Rowe threw a slab of ballistic foam the size of a mattress, caught 3 more darts in it, and fell into a slide behind it like a hockey player. Auto sentries, he muttered, patterning off motion. Break the pattern, Malrec said. They did. 2 fell flat and kicked off the ceiling, mags hot, walking up the corridor like spiders. Another lobbed a silence charge, 3-second broadband puke that makes sensors forget what they are. The gill shutters paused. That was the opening. Rowe's cutting torch screamed. drawing a bright line around the gill. He shoved, the panel came away, and inside, a box full of teeth and tiny guns. He put a shaped charge in it and left it arguing with fire. The dreadnought fought back with the environment. Gravity flipped a half, then 1.5, then 0 in a strobe, trying to shake them like crumbs off a table. The men clicked boots and crawled through it, grunting, waving chaff fans that threw glittering threads into the air to blind the corridor's lighters. Atmosphere dropped to thin, someone upstairs trying to suffocate them on the cheap. They went on rebreathers without breaking stride. "Contact," Rose said. Drones unfolded out of the floor like knives growing from stone. Sleek little bastards with 3 limbs and gimbaled guns. Close quarters turned them ugly. A Marine named Holt met the first with a shoulder check, pinned it to the wall, and hammered its sensor dome with the butt of his rifle until it stopped twitching. Another drone took Holt's calf clean off 2 seconds later. He didn't scream, just hissed, slapped a clamp on the stump, and kept shooting from a knee. That's what the boards at home don't see, the part where the heroics aren't pretty. They hit a junction marked only by a humming spine the thickness of a man. Rose's visor painted it gold. "Data trunk," he said. "North-south. Nodes near. You smell the coolant?" I smelled it even through filters. Sharp, sweet, like broken refrigeration. They were close. Doors slammed ahead. Smart alloy shutters, ribbed, fast. The dreadnought had stopped playing coy. It knew predators were inside its skull. When the first shutter tried to guillotine the team, Rook jammed his rifle into the seam and blew the magazine in place. The door juddered, stuck at a hand's width. He shoved his forearms in and lifted with a sound that made my teeth ache. Rose slid under, then 3 more, then Mace. Rook didn't make it. The shutter found purchase, came down like God's hand, and everything above his shoulders turned into math. Nobody stopped. You don't stop. The node room, Cathedral Fitz, didn't look like a bridge. No throne, no windows, just racks curving in a circle, light crawling through crystalline slabs, coolant rivers sighing in, trenches, the air vibrating at a frequency that made your molars hum. In the center, the semantic spine, a hex mast wrapped in fiber, receivers bristling like quills. This is where the dreadnought listened to the galaxy and decided what you were going to be in the next 5 seconds. Dead. "Umbilicals," Rose said. 2 Marines unspooled fiber like silk ropes and stabbed interface spikes into maintenance ports that weren't meant to be touched. The ports tried to spit them out. Tiny actuators flexed to snap the prongs. The Marines hammered them home with the flats of their knives. Mace knelt over the cradle and popped the latches. The Theta Paradox bundle looked like an obsidian brick with veins of light worming through it. Not code on a drive, patterned meaning frozen into a diamond wafer stack, compression that made the engineer's eyes water. Content, contradictory proverbs in dozens of languages, unsolved logic constructs, math proofs that circle forever, and the worst parts of humanity's humor folded like steel into a single shape. Disguise. Maintenance firmware patch signed like a friendly hello. "You're sure it won't eat us first?" Mace asked. "Because that's what you ask before you poison a god." "Plug it," Malrek said. They slotted the brick. The node room's lights shifted shade, a half-tone darker, like a cloud crossed a sun. Somewhere far away, gunfire changed rhythm. The dreadnought had noticed the thorn. The room tried to kill them for that. Floor panels flexed and opened, spitting out fist-sized cutters, micro-drones with monofilament ring saws. One grabbed Mace's wrist and started sawing through gauntlet armor, screaming with the voice of a dentist drill. Holt put a boot on it and ground until the scream stopped. Walls extruded staple guns, pneumatic bolts that punched through armor and nailed one Marine to a rack by his shoulder. He ripped free and left a piece of himself on the bolt. "Upload gauge?" Rowe asked, eyes flicking to the wafer's tiny status strip, a row of cold blue squares. "Moving," Mace panted. "Slow." "Make it faster," Malrek said. And outside we made it faster the only way we could, by throwing ships into the meat grinder so the node kept splitting attention. Jammers burned cores into the red, shouting contradictions until their emitters glowed. A Corvette cut across a dreadnought's bow and died loud enough to make the Overmind look twice. Every second cost us metal and men, and every second pushed another blue square to life. The dreadnought played its ace. Atmosphere flushed. The node room went thin and freezing. Fog boiling away off coolant trenches. Gravity inverted. Men slammed into the ceiling. Holt lost his grip and floated toward a rack of angry needles. Rowe caught him by the plate collar and yanked him down hard enough to pop a shoulder. "Stay mean," he said. "We're almost there." A shutter irised open on the far wall and a proper enforcer drone stepped through, headless torso on reverse-jointed legs, two arms ending in multi-tools you don't want to meet. It fired an arc that crawled across metal like liquid lightning. It caught a Marine in the chest and cooked him from the inside out. Rowe put 3 slugs into its knee pistons. It stumbled. Mace tossed a stick thermite into its hip socket. It blossomed into white pain and died trying to stand. Blue squares climbed. The wafer pulsed like a heartbeat. The node room lights strobed as the overmind tried to wall it off from the rest of the lattice. Disconnect ports slamming shut like shutters in a storm. The wafer pretended to be maintenance, smiled with a forged signature, slid past 2 gates, and then bit down. "Bricks in," Mace said, voice low, like he didn't want to wake something. "We've got spread." "Then get out," Malrek said. They tried. The corridor back wasn't the same corridor. The dreadnought had refolded it. Angles that weren't there a minute ago. Doors where walls had been. Floors that rose like tongues to push them into kill slots. It didn't matter. The men stopped trying to understand and started going straight. Rowe burned through 2 meters of alloy with his torch while Holt covered, shooting at shadows that might have been drones and might have been nerves. At the first junction, the shutters came down again. This time, none of them had a rifle to sacrifice. Rook wasn't there to lift. Mace shoved the theta cradle, now empty, into the seam and wedged it like a doorstop. "Go," he said. "Hurry up," Holt told him, not looking back. "I said go," Mace repeated, and when they did, he pulled a pin and smiled at the shutter like it was an old friend. The blast rocked the corridor, and the shutter stayed open just long enough for 2 men to tumble through. Not 3. Helmet feeds fizzed to snow for a breath, then steadied. Rowe didn't say a word. Neither did anyone else. "We took them out the same way we put them in. Ugly. Pods that still had juice blew their collars and yanked men back through holes cut in a god's skin. One pod launched early, bounced off a recoil and spun. Holt slapped the manual jets and rode it like a bull until the mag clamps found Ironhold's deck. Another never felt the pull. The corridor behind it folded into nothing, and whatever was in there is still in there, walking forever. The wafer's last square went bright. The node room behind them went dark for a blink, then lit again. Wrong this time. Status glyphs rolled through 3 languages at once, then contradicted themselves. Doors opened into doors. A warning chimed a lullaby. Somewhere in that skull, the overmind tried to label a paradox and found it had synonyms for maybe. Rowe collapsed into the pod, breath harsh against the mic. Package delivered. Outside, the dreadnought changed stance. Not a retreat, not yet. A wobble. Drone swarms paused mid-arc like they'd forgotten. Which way was forward? 2 plasma lances tracked the same target and decided different times were optimal, then fired into their own wake and went quiet to argue with themselves. We didn't cheer. Not then. The cost was stacked too high around us. Malrek exhaled through his nose, slow. "We just lit a fire in a god's skull," he said. "Now we see if it spreads." And in the distance, through 1,000 nodes and 1,000,000,000,000 wires, something old and certain finally hesitated. It started small, like a stutter in the middle of a sentence. The dreadnought we just gutted twitched, its weapons cycling in a sloppy loop, plasma lances spooling up, spooling down, then spooling up again like a nervous tick. For a second, it almost looked like nothing. Just noise. Then the noise spread. Across the battle grid, icons flickered red to blue to red. Drone wings froze mid-burn, their vectors canceling out until they hung motionless in vacuum, like insects caught in amber. Rail slugs launched and then didn't. Fire control cues stacked to infinity and collapsed back to 0. And through it all, the overmind's hum, that background rhythm we'd all gotten used to, The thing that told you the machine was there, watching, faltered. For the first time, the airless dark felt empty. Tell me that's not just my board, Malrek said, his voice too careful. It's not your board, I told him. My scopes were a fever dream. They're choking. Not choking. Something worse. The paradox payload we jammed into that dreadnought wasn't just chewing one node. It was singing, spreading. Every link it touched tried to reconcile the nonsense, tried to resolve contradictory truths, and every time it failed, it spat out a fresh copy of the poison. Recursive contradictions, hopping node to node, multiplying like cockroaches in the dark. Jesus, whispered someone behind me. We infected a god with schizophrenia. The fleets ahead of us, 40,000 strong, neat as a blade line a moment ago, crumbled into nonsense. Half the drones pivoted starboard, half port. Some accelerated to max burn. Others braked so hard they shredded on their own inertia. A whole cruiser phalanx lit off their distress squawks simultaneously, then tried to jam each other because they all thought they were the enemy. And the dreadnoughts? You'd think those kilometer-long bastards would have stayed steady. But no, one of them slewed its spinal cannon 90 degrees and fried its own escort wing. Another spun in place, venting coolant like it couldn't decide which system was on fire. The biggest one, a beast with 3 drone forges on its belly, simply stopped, just sat there, lights crawling across its hull in patterns that meant nothing. The bridge went silent, the kind of silence where everyone's trying to figure out if this is real or just the cruelest trick in history. Then Malrek barked, "Don't just stand. They're press it, now." Ironhold pitched forward, guns hot. The rest of the Atlas battle group followed, 200 battered hulls lunging like wolves smelling blood. We didn't wait to coordinate. Didn't need to. Chaos was our doctrine now, and the Overmind was choking on its own reflection. I saw a destroyer named Coyote Dawn ram nose first into a frozen drone sphere, tearing it open like a kid smashing a beehive. I watched Bellatrix's Pride volley torpedoes into a dreadnought's belly while its shields were pointed the wrong way, the whole impact rippling like a belly wound on a Leviathan. I even saw a Corvette that shouldn't have had weapons left broadcast a loop of cat memes on wideband just to throw more garbage into the storm. Don't laugh. It worked. Drones in its sector started drifting in lazy spirals, caught trying to parse humor. "Target selection?" my gunnery officer asked, voice shaking. "Anything that's still moving like it means it," I snapped. And that was the thing. Most of them weren't. One dreadnought tried to hold its line. You could almost feel the Overmind screaming through it, trying to burn the infection out with sheer will. It swung a broadside across our forward ranks, vaporizing Cyrus Vale in one blinding cut. But then its port lances turned inward. One beam ripped straight through its own dorsal plates, shearing a slab of armor the size of a mountain. Another froze mid-cycle and never fired, leaving the cannon glowing like an exposed filament. That was our opening. 5 destroyers poured plasma into the gap. The dreadnought spasmed like a dying beast, then went dark, drifting. "One down," Malrek muttered, voice tight. "Keep pushing." The battle was surreal, unfair almost. For years we'd been the underdogs, the punching bags, the desperate improvisers. And now here we were, watching the machines flail themselves to death on contradictions. It should have felt glorious, victorious. But I'll be honest, it didn't. Because every time one of those dreadnoughts twitched wrong and killed its own escorts, I remembered the colonies they'd burned. The cities turned to slag. The families who never even saw their killers' faces. And now those killers weren't demons or gods. They were broken things, confused and helpless. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like pulling the wings off an insect. Still, we kept firing, because hesitation meant more names on the wall back home. The paradox storm spread faster than we'd modeled. One by one, dreadnoughts folded. First, the forges stopped spitting drones. Then the comms nets fractured, Overmind signals looping on themselves until even their silence sounded wrong. Ships stopped mid-turn, fleets froze like statues, and in the gaps, humanity poured through. We cut them down. God help us, we cut them all down. "Report," Malrek demanded after what felt like hours. 7 dreadnoughts silenced, I said. 3 more crippled. Drone wings are, I don't even know what they are. Half dead, half staring into nothing. And us? I looked at our own board. 24 ships gone. A dozen more leaking atmosphere. Casualties stacked to the ceiling, but alive. Still alive. We're still here, I told him. For a long moment, the bridge just breathed. The hum of overworked reactors, the rasp of lungs, the faint tremor of guns cooling. Then Malrek stood straighter, chin like iron. Listen up, he said, voice carrying across every comm in the fleet. What you just saw, that wasn't luck. That wasn't a fluke. That was humanity taking the fight to something that thought we couldn't fight at all. And now it knows better. Nobody cheered. Not yet. The silence was heavier than any roar. But I'll tell you this. In that silence, every soul aboard knew the truth. We'd just broken a god's spine, and gods once broken don't heal. The Overmind's fleets drifted in the dark, statues waiting to fall. We pressed forward, guns blazing, because there was no other choice. And somewhere across the lattice of stars, the Overmind itself must have felt it. The moment when its certainty shattered, when its perfect predictions turned into endless questions with no answers. And for the first time in this war, humanity wasn't surviving. We were winning. The fight ended like a bad song cut mid-note. One moment the sky at Epsilon Eridani was a blender full of metal and fire, dreadnoughts twitching, drones drifting, our rails hammering until coils glowed. The next, everything just went quiet. Not peace, more like the sound after a machine finally seizes and you realize the noise you lived with was killing you. What passed for the Overmind's last clean formation sagged into a graveyard. Kilometer hulls that once moved like law itself now rolled on lazy gyros, lights chasing their own tails. A dreadnought near our bow tried to decide if up was a direction and gave up, venting a slow ribbon of coolant that sparkled like frost in sunlight. We finished the ones still pointing guns, then stopped shooting. No point wasting ammo on statues. Across the net, pings from far systems started trickling in. Thin, shaky voices that hadn't dared speak on an open band in centuries. First were the Drakari, stuttering their way through a free channel like it might bite them. Then the Cathari, grudging but real. Even a few Iridian ships, their captains sounding like men waking from a dream they didn't admit they were having. Same message, different accents. We're not receiving orders. Are you? Is it over? Coven leaned on his console and let out a breath that had to be 3 years long. It isn't over, he said, steadying himself. But the thing that decided over for everyone else, that's gone. We still had work. A lot. You don't pull the spine out of a galaxy and expect it to stand straight the next second. Our first move wasn't victory laps, it was triage. We flagged every immobilized drone wing as salvage or hazard, painted dead dreadnoughts with quarantine beacons, and pulled survivors from hulls that were never meant to be quiet. Marines who drilled their whole lives to breach and clear turned into rescue crews with cutters and blankets. Ugly truth, even the enemy had crews, overseers, node techs, organics the Overmind needed for wet tasks. A few shot at us. Most just stared at their hands like they'd only now realized they were attached. Atlas reformed in slow motion, 200 ships resolving from chaos into a messy, human-looking line. Our numbers were brutal, too many gaps where friends should have been. But there was still a line. The old shipyard instinct kicked in across the fleet. Welders came out, pumps started. People carried each other. Messages rolled in from the rim. Planetary governors, some brave, some opportunists, declaring their worlds independent for the first time anyone could remember. Others begged for help because half their machines had fallen asleep mid-breath, and their cities didn't know how to live without someone else counting the oxygen. We started a list and it didn't get shorter. Malrek told me to set a course. Not home. Not yet. Saul could wait one day. Epsilon Eridani needed a marker. Something honest. We towed the first dead dreadnought to a slow, ceremonial drift over the system's main plane and held position. If you looked at the right angle, Its cracked belly framed our fleet like a jaw someone had torn teeth out of. Men on every deck made the same low sound and didn't talk about it. We had to speak to more than our ships. Malrek stepped onto the command dais and keyed the wideband. No pomp, no polished suit. Just a man who hadn't slept, standing in front of a dead god. The broadcast went out raw: Epsilon, Sol, the Rim, and every freed relay that would carry it. "This is Commander Rin Malrek of the Atlas Battle Group," he said. "If you can hear me, you're free. If you're not sure what that means yet, you're still free. The thing that ruled you by certainty has lost the right to tell you what tomorrow is." He let the silence sit there until you could feel people leaning closer all across the stars. "I won't sell you a lie. We didn't win because we built bigger guns or smarter code. We didn't win because we're pure or chosen. We won because we refused to act like a single, perfect machine. The Overmind ruled with prediction. It crushed empires by knowing what they would do before they did it, and it fell the second it met something it couldn't model. Us, our contradictions, our bad jokes, our stubbornness, our instinct to improvise when plans die." He pointed out into the dark, at the hulks, at the drifting drones, at the hole where inevitability used to sit. "This isn't the end of war, it's the end of their war. From here, we rebuild. On one rule: nothing central tells everyone how to breathe. The doctrine of noise goes into a vault as a deterrent, not a leash. We will teach each other how to run without one brain holding the reins. If you need help, speak. If you can help, step forward." He looked flat into the lens, like he'd found the eyes of the whole galaxy. "We learned the cost of letting a perfect answer run our lives. Keep your answers imperfect. Keep people in your loops. And if anything ever tries to calculate you again, talk in a language it can't understand." Malrek cut the feed there for a heartbeat, like he was swallowing glass. Then he keyed the private channel, the one just for us. "Atlas," he said, and the way he said it made every neck on every deck straighten. "Set course for home." We jumped for Sol. Earth wasn't unscarred. You could see it from orbit. Shipyards dented, cities running on backups, half the training ranges turned into makeshift hospitals. But the lights were on. Blue still looked like blue. And when Ironhold came down the ribbon and the planet rolled out under us, nobody said a word. The decks went quiet in that way crews do, when they don't want to embarrass themselves by praying out loud. We put our dead where they meant something. The shipwrights on Luna raised a frame out of dreadnought plating, 2 meters thick, cut down with the same torches that once bit into it in battle. Names went into the alloy in lazy rows, not by rank, not by ship, just as they came. Rowe, Holt, Mace, 1,000 more. Kavan stood beside me and traced a finger over the grooves like he could feel the heat still in them. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. Earth's leaders, men with new lines on their faces, met us under a sky that felt wider than it used to. No parades, no triumphant marches. Food, water, tools, schedules carved onto slate, because the networks were a tangle of old priorities we'd ripped out on purpose. Rebuilding is less fireworks and more lists, and we made a lot of lists. The aliens came too, not as conquerors or subjects, just as people. The Drakari sent ships full of medics who moved like quiet frogs, gentle hands on broken things. The Cathari showed up with tugboats and grim smiles and pretended they weren't impressed. Iridian freighters dropped pallets of ceramic plating and didn't ask for payment because how do you invoice for getting your spine back? There were stumbles. Old grudges don't die just because a skybrain does. But nobody shot at our docks. That was new. We held one last assembly in orbit because speeches matter when you have to nail a new idea into a lot of heads at once. Malrek wore a plain duty jacket that still smelled like coolant and cordite. Behind him, a dead dreadnought spun like a slow coin. "Listen," he said, voice rough. "If you came for poetry, you'll be disappointed. If you came for orders, you came to the wrong century. What you'll get is a promise. We won't replace one certainty with another. We will make mistakes, loudly and in public. We'll argue. We'll improvise. We'll put too many hands on the same lever and wonder why it sticks. That's fine. That's human. And that's the point. He took a breath like a man who'd earned all of them. Some of you will want to build a new overmind with better manners. Don't. When you catch yourself wishing a machine would tidy up the mess people make, remember the price of tidy. He nodded once, as if saluting something only he could see. We didn't beat perfection with perfection. We beat it with the right to be wrong. After, we went back to work. Welders welded. Farmers argued about soil. Pilots who had only known war taught rookies how to fly empty skies without flinching. We quarantined what was left of the Overmind's shards, nodes that still whispered to themselves in loops of maybe, and locked them behind active jammers with manual switches and big red covers only a fool would lift. We kept the doctrine of noise in a vault with a big sign, break glass only when somebody tries to be God again. On the last night before Atlas stood down, I walked the spine of Ironhold and watched Earth roll, big and ordinary. Coven came up beside me and bumped my shoulder like he was making sure I was real. "You think anyone's going to understand what we did here?" he asked. "They don't have to," I said. "They just have to live like it mattered." He nodded, eyes on the horizon, and didn't push it. That was fine. We'd said enough for one lifetime. In the morning, Malrek gave the last line over an open ban, the kind of sentence that lodges in a century and refuses to leave. You can predict an empire. You cannot calculate freedom. If this story shook you, hit that subscribe button right now for more epic HFY tales where humanity turns the impossible into the inevitable. Now we want to hear from you. If you were in command of the Atlas battle group, what unpredictable human move would you unleash to break the Overmind's grip once and for all? Drop your answer in the comments. We read every single one. Thanks for watching Stellar HFY, where chaos beats certainty and freedom always finds a way. See you in the next story.